Well, hey there, and I hope you're well. Well, goodness me, that's us on to the seventh teaching already in the Journey series, and it looks like it's just going to come up, quite nicely to Christmas. But this is the fourth teaching in four series that I want to have as a foundation for this online platform that we have. And for those of you who've been through it, the first one was called "What's Holding You Back?" All about the things that might hold you back from God and from church. The second was the Jesus experience, which is what actually happens. If I was to give my life to the Lord, what would actually happen. And the third was the technical names, the first principles of the oracles of God, or the back to basics. But basically, guys, the foundational teachings of God's word, the big one, the one that's so essential for every Christian, the milk of the word. And then there's this one, which is the natural follow-on, which is the journey. The mapping out that map of salvation that any Christian is going to take, using the foreshadow of the children of Israel. They were in Egypt, and they came across the Red Sea. They are in the wilderness, crossed the River Jordan, and then into their promised land. And, for us, that Egypt represents our old life. Us coming out of that old life, us going through the waters of baptism, us going through that wilderness experience where we get to know God, to that point where God leads us into that promised land, whatever that may be. And a lot of Christians struggle, guys, because they might not have this process really fully understood in their minds, you guys. And this is the most important part. This is the thing about doctrine, is that it provides that framework in our minds to know exactly where we're going. And we might not understand parts of it on the way along. It's called faith, but we can see the process. God wanting us to grow from the people that came out of the world to being mighty, mighty in the spirit, being close to Him, having grown through and learned so much and finding that satisfaction in life, the thing that a lot of people crave, And you tend to find that when you do move into your promised land, that's what you do find. You find that great satisfaction. You find that, great purpose. You've seen God move many times in your own life, and you're convinced, But there's a moment that just happens just before that, which is when you actually just spy out the land. When you spy out the land. Now there are thousands upon thousands of teachings, throughout, up to the point of where we are. But of course, we're just pulling on one thread, just that basics of the journey itself. And basically, you guys, next year, as the follow-on, when it comes to this teaching, we're going to go back. We'll go back into the wilderness. We'll learn about God, about prayer, and about worship, and about your job, and about your family and marriage, and just whatever else, But for the moment, I just want to lay these sort of things out for us, So there comes this point. The children of Israel now have wandered the wilderness for 40 years. A lot of you'll know the story. They came out of Egypt, they went through the Red Sea, God parted it, and it closed behind them, destroying their enemies. And now that was it. There's this great gulf between the person and their old life. But now they're in the wilderness, and a person might be out of Egypt, but Egypt's not quite out of them, And that wilderness experience is there for a person to really grow and get to know God. And it is full of successes, and it's also full of failures. But the good thing is with God is that even our failures are His successes, because what He's trying to do is help us grow. But of course, that wilderness experience needs to come to an end at some stage. You'll always be learning about God. You'll always have a new challenge or whatever, if that's the kind of life you end up following, But it's very different when we move into the promised land. In the next teaching, we're going to talk about the promised land, the conclusion. But for the moment, let's do the bit just before it, Now, at this particular point in the children of Israel's story, they send out 12 spies into the land to go and check it out and see what it is. And they come back and they say, the wilderness wasn't the greatest. Guys, this place has got milk and honey, it's got fig trees, it's got fruit trees, it's got absolutely everything. It is absolutely amazing, And this is what the 12 came back with. However, 10 of them were a little fearful, and they brought back some stories about great big giants and mighty cities and stuff like that, and really started spreading this fear around the camp, Whereas the other two guys that came back, Joshua and Caleb, I actually really like both of these guys, but Caleb, when he came back, says, "Let's go and do it." And he, like, well, hold on a second, wait a minute. Joshua had the sort of right frame of mind. He was saying, "We can do this. We can really do this." Quite balanced in that sense. Whereas Caleb was like, "Let's just go," and that's tends to be what I'm kind of like, to be frank. It's just to go for it. But these other 10 really sowed a lot of discord, you guys, and really upset people and really gave, they gave the wrong picture of what was across there. And unfortunately, what they were doing as well was giving a wrong impression of what God could do in there, you know. After everything God had done, after everything He'd shown the people, here they were, this group, still doubting Him. Irrespective of this big city or these giants, Joshua knew, Caleb knew, God couldn't. God, there's not a question. It will be a challenge, but there's not a question. God can conquer anything. But the other 10, that's not what it was like for them. And guys, this point comes in a Christian's life, and whatever that promised land may be, for me, again, you guys, pastoring, preaching and teaching, that was my promised land. That's what took 7 years, me being in the wilderness for 7 years before I got to step out at the very beginning part of that. And some of you might think, well, I don't want to be a pastor or a preacher or anything like that. Absolutely. Your promised land might be this new family. Your promised land might be asking this individual to marry you. It could be a new job. It could be a new house, a whole new place to be. It could be moving to a different region. It could be moving to another country. It can be any of those things, you guys, And it can also be, it depends who you are, obviously. If you're really called to the ministry, God might call you to serve the church or teach in the church or anything like that. Whatever it may be, it marks not a change but a transition from one place to the other. And of course, in that wilderness, the guys had really enjoyed the manna and the quails, and they'd learnt a lot, they'd seen a lot, they'd seen great successes. The miracles they saw over that period of time, you guys, are just the fact you just couldn't really imagine most of these things, especially this presence of God coming all the time, and the tabernacle and Him being there, and wow, crazy. But yet these spies came back and they sowed that discord where people really struggled in their faith to now believe this promised land, this point where it was going to come, And like I always say, back then, different time, different stage in mankind's history, different stage in the sort of salvation of the Jews, and whichever way you want to look at it. But these guys, they really got it for that, So once they were sort of eradicated, that's when we went forward. But there's ways of looking at this, you guys. You can either look at yourself as being a Joshua or a Caleb, and having seen everything God's done, as saying, yeah, look, I'm nervous about moving forward in this, but I'll go for it because I know God will have me. Or you can be another person, who after everything God's done, after everything you've seen, you still choose not to go. And this is the real sad part, you guys, because it's just a fact that there are a lot of Christians, you guys. These guys are saved. They're not thought of any less or whatever, but they're still in the wilderness and might always be there, And when God's maybe called them to move forward into something, again, it could be a job or a house or a change of lifestyle or anything, and they went, no, there's too much. Then they just remain in that wilderness place. And my deepest hope is that anyone listening to this would look at that promised land and say, yeah, I've seen what God's done in my life. I've seen what He does in the lives of others. I want this. This is what I want. And another way of looking at it, and of course, I'm always keeping this really simple, as I preach for weeks on end about this, even just this particular subject alone. But that 12 things could be in your mind, where there's two parts of this in your mind, where you're saying, yes, let's go for it. There's another bit like Joshua saying, right, yeah, we can do this, and really think about it. But there could also be that 10 other things. And those 10 other things could be, can we afford it? Could I really take it? Have I got the character? Have I got the skill for this job or the skill for that job, But the one thing you've got to believe, you guys, and this is what dispels, it just gets rid, to the best of our ability, that's what gets rid of most of these doubts, you guys, is the fact that we've been through a lot with God, and we've been very convinced by God. And that's what should really start pushing these lies and pushing these lies so that you can make that decision to move forward. You've seen what God can do. And of course, you know, generally when you come to this promised land, it's obviously something that God said somewhere along the line, this is what I want for you, child. This is what I want for you, you know. And now is the time. You know, now is the time to move forward. And guys, sometimes it's not the easiest of decisions because, you know, it takes a lot. For me, I was sitting there thinking to myself, you know, right, I've got to stand up and preach and teach now, 2009. Never done it before, ever. And I get pushed into this, not pushed, that's not true, not pushed. I get put into this position where I have to preach this 12-week public teaching season in front of all my friends and people in the church that are way more experienced than me and you know, people I don't know and things like that. And I've got to run these nights, you know, all that sort of stuff. But the thing you've got to understand, you guys, and this is probably the key point, is taking it in faith that if God is asking you to move forward, is that He's already prepared you. All those concerns you might have about money or your wisdom in that or whatever, you know, that those things will actually activate and kick in when you go for it. And it's about trusting Him, saying, Lord, okay, I've seen what you can do, but I also trust you that you've done everything that I need to move forward into this. You just trust that. And I'll tell you something, you guys, I spent 4 years, the last teaching that we did, the Back to Basics, the First Principles Oracles of God, I studied that for 4 years, you guys. 4 years, exhaustively. And in that time, I'd ulcerative colitis, and my first big surgery to remove my large bowel and get a colostomy bag, and then, you know, later to remove the last part, you know, which was another big operation. But the First Principles Oracles of God took 4 years for me, and it was like exhaustively studying it from every angle, and the Greek, the Hebrew and Greek texts, and just everything, putting together this really, really big teaching, you know. And I found that when I stood up, got up and started talking about it, it was all there. It was all there. Never mind if you think you've got a terrible memory. That has nothing to do with it. God had trained me without me even realising it, and for the most part. And every single night that I went up was perfect. For me, it was perfect at that particular stage of my life. And by the way, guys, if you'd like to listen to those, we've got an audio only on our tribulationsoldier.com website called the Audio Suite, and they are those original teachings from just the start of 2010. But he had, and not only had he trained me in the things, and I thought, right, okay, well, I get the preaching because I've learned all this stuff, but what about all the other stuff that surrounded it? The people asking me questions, then me having to pray for other people and minister to them and answer this and answer that. I just knew what I was doing. It was like, how is this hard? How am I managing to do this? And then by the end of that season, you guys, wow, I'd reached my promised land. I'd just reached it. And it's the same thing for you in whatever it is that God's going to take you into. And like I said, it might not be the ministry. You just think, well, I don't want to be a pastor. It could be, like I said, it could be your new job. You're moving on your family to a new home, to a new area, to a new thing, you know? It could be, you know, that girlfriend, you know, that could be the starting point of your promised land, that love interest that, you know, you've been looking for and you've been waiting for, you know. It can be any of these things, you guys. And, you know, it is a great feeling. And of course, in life, you know, this is what everybody looks for. They want purpose and direction, you know. And purpose and direction is what God provides. But not only does God provide that, but He provides the reality, the actual result at the end. You know, like that 4 years for me was all theory. And sometimes that's what it's like in the wilderness. It's more theory. Then you come to do it for real. And boy, oh boy, guys, it's worth it. It is so worth it. I went through 4 years, 2 major surgeries, pain, runs to the emergency room, and in between times I could hardly do anything, so I was studying, and God had that for me all along, you know. And when I entered that promised land, it was fantastic. And of course, the conclusion to this, you guys will talk about the promised land itself to give you that real understanding. But yeah, guys, that's what happened back then in the Old Testament there. And again, from the very point we started in Exodus right the way through, guys, there's years worth of teachings there. I could do these teachings for the next 30 years and still not manage it. But next year, again, like I said, we're going to delve into that. We're going to go into marriage and family and relationships and just everything that people learn in that wilderness to get to that place in their promised land. So yeah, guys, my advice would always be, guys, don't be like the other 10. Be a Caleb, be a Joshua. Look at it and say, yeah, it's going to be a challenge. But God's done all this so far. And He's done everything He needs in me and in this people to set us forward. And, guys, that's when you get that conclusion, And a lot of times as well, you guys, it's when life kind of really begins. It's where God's, it's no more theory anymore, it's the real thing. And that tends to be what we're looking for, It's great to live in faith, but, we need to have that faith finished and rewarded. It can't just be an open-ended thing. It has to end at some point, everything, there's a season. That's what God teaches us. We go in and out of seasons. And one season ends and another season begins. So guys, for the next teaching, we're going to do the conclusion, which is the promised land, is when one season comes to an end and this next season comes forth. So for now, you guys, listen, God bless you. Thank you so much for watching. And I really hope you enjoy the next one.